The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the mahogany conference table as voices rose in barely contained frustration. In the opulent boardroom of the Meridian Tower's 42nd floor, what should have been a routine contract signing had devolved into a diplomatic nightmare that threatened to unravel 6 months of meticulous planning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The tension was suffocating as Sheikh Rashid bin Khalil al-Mansuri sat with perfect composure, his dark eyes scanning the faces of the 12 executives gathered around the conference table. These weren't ordinary businessmen. They were the elite of Atlas Engineering Corporation, each commanding 7-figure salaries and wielding influence that could reshape entire city skylines. Yet today they appeared as helpless as schoolchildren facing an exam they hadn't studied for. Marcus Thornfield, Atlas Engineering's Vice President of International Development, loosened his Italian silk tie for the 3rd time in an hour. The room's climate control was functioning perfectly, but beads of perspiration continued to form on his forehead as he contemplated the magnitude of what was slipping through their fingers. The Emerald Coast Resort project represented more than just another lucrative contract. It was Atlas's gateway into the Middle Eastern luxury development market, a sector worth over $12 billion annually. For 8 grueling hours, they had attempted to finalize the terms of what industry insiders were calling the deal of the decade. The Sheikh's investment consortium had selected Atlas from among 47 international firms to design and construct a revolutionary eco-luxury resort spanning 3 private islands off the coast of Qatar. The project would feature underwater suites, floating gardens, and sustainable architecture that would set new standards for environmental responsibility in luxury hospitality. Everything had proceeded smoothly through the morning session. Legal teams from both sides had methodically reviewed contract clauses, environmental impact assessments had been approved, and the financing structure had been agreed upon without significant dispute. The Sheikh had conducted the entire negotiation in impeccable English, his Oxford education evident in every carefully chosen word and precise legal reference. But as the afternoon shadows lengthened across the Manhattan skyline, something had shifted in the room's dynamic. The Sheikh had begun interjecting brief phrases in Arabic during conversations, initially directing these comments to his own advisors. His tone remained cordial, his demeanor unchanged, yet an unmistakable undercurrent of evaluation had entered his interactions with the Atlas team. Thornfield had initially dismissed these moments as natural. After all, it was reasonable for the Sheikh to consult with his advisors in their native language during such complex negotiations. But, as the Arabic exchanges became more frequent and pointed, an uncomfortable realization began to dawn on him. The Sheikh wasn't simply consulting with his team, he was testing the Americans. The first clear indication came when Sheikh al-Mansuri addressed a direct question in Arabic to Thomas Hartwell, Atlas's chief financial officer. Hartwell, a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms with his analytical brilliance and razor-sharp financial acumen, could only stare blankly at the Sheikh before stammering, "I'm sorry, Your Excellency, but I don't speak Arabic. Could you please repeat that in English?" The Sheikh's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind his eyes, disappointment, perhaps, or calculation. He repeated his question in English, asking about the projected return on investment for the resort's renewable energy systems. Hartwell answered competently, but the moment had created an almost imperceptible shift in the room's atmosphere. As the afternoon progressed, the pattern became more pronounced. Sheikh al-Mansuri would pose increasingly complex questions in Arabic to different members of the Atlas team, each time waiting patiently for the inevitable request for translation. His advisors watched these exchanges with poker faces, but Thornfield couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing some form of elaborate assessment. The breaking point came during a discussion about the resort's cultural integration programs. Sheikh al-Mansuri had been emphasizing the importance of respecting local traditions and creating authentic experiences for international guests. The conversation had grown passionate as he described his vision for bridging Eastern and Western hospitality concepts. "This project represents more than commercial success," the Sheikh had said, his voice carrying the weight of genuine conviction. "It must honor our heritage while embracing innovation. It must speak to souls, not merely satisfy shareholders." The Atlas executives nodded appreciatively, making notes and murmuring agreement. But then, in a moment that would later prove pivotal, Sheikh al-Mansuri stood and delivered what sounded like a heartfelt monologue in flowing Arabic. His words carried obvious emotion, his gestures expansive and meaningful. The speech lasted nearly 3 minutes, and when he finished, he looked expectantly around the table. The silence that followed was deafening. 12 of America's most accomplished engineers, architects, and business executives sat in their expensive suits, staring at the Sheikh with expressions ranging from confusion to embarrassment. Not one of them had understood a single word. Thornfield cleared his throat awkwardly. "Your Excellency, that was very moving. Could you perhaps share the English translation with us?" The Sheikh's response was measured, but there was no mistaking the disappointment in his voice. "I was explaining the spiritual significance of this project to our people, Mr. Thornfield. I was sharing the poetry that my grandfather wrote about these very islands, describing them as pearls scattered by angels across the emerald waters. I was hoping that at least one person in this room might understand not just the business opportunity, but the cultural sacred trust we are placing in your hands." The implications hung heavy in the air. Here was a man prepared to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in their vision, and they couldn't even comprehend the cultural context that made the project meaningful to him. Worse, they hadn't bothered to learn enough about his background to anticipate that Arabic fluency might be valuable in building the relationship. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, Atlas's Director of Sustainable Design, attempted to salvage the moment. "Your Excellency, we deeply respect the cultural significance of this project. Perhaps we could arrange for translation services to better understand these important aspects." The Sheikh's smile was polite but distant. "Translation services, Dr. Morrison? We have been negotiating for 8 hours. This project will require years of collaboration, countless decisions that blend technical expertise with cultural sensitivity. How can we build something meaningful together if we cannot even communicate at the most basic level?" The question wasn't rhetorical, and everyone in the room knew it. They were facing the collapse of the most significant opportunity in Atlas Engineering's 40-year history, and it wasn't due to technical capabilities or financial terms. They were failing because none of them had bothered to learn the language of their most important potential client. Robert Chen, the company's senior project manager, made a desperate attempt to redirect the conversation. "Your Excellency, while we may not speak Arabic, we have extensive experience working with international clients. We've successfully completed projects in 12 countries, always adapting to local customs and requirements." Sheikh Al-Mansouri nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Chen, I don't doubt your technical competence or your good intentions. But understanding customs and truly understanding a culture are different things entirely. When I spoke just now about my grandfather's poetry, I wasn't simply sharing family history. I was revealing the soul of what we hope to create together." He gestured toward the architectural renderings spread across the conference table. "These buildings will stand for generations. They will welcome visitors from around the world, but they will also be part of our homeland's legacy. How can I trust this vision to people who cannot understand what I am truly asking of them?" The weight of his words settled over the Atlas team like a heavy blanket. Thornfield found himself thinking about the countless hours they had spent perfecting their technical proposals, the detailed financial projections, the environmental impact studies. All of it suddenly seemed superficial compared to the fundamental disconnect the Sheikh had identified. Dr. Morrison tried once more to bridge the gap. "Your Excellency, if language is the barrier, surely we can address this. We could hire Arabic-speaking consultants, bring in cultural advisors." "You could," the Sheikh interrupted gently, "but that would be a surface solution to a deeper issue. You see, this conversation has revealed something important about how your company approaches international partnerships. You prepare extensively for the technical aspects, the legal frameworks, the financial structures. But you don't prepare to truly connect with the people you hope to work with." One of his advisors whispered something in Arabic, and the Sheikh nodded before continuing. "My colleague has just reminded me that in Arabic culture, business relationships are built on personal connection and mutual understanding. We don't simply exchange services for payment. We create bonds that honor both parties' dignity and values." The room fell silent as the Atlas executives absorbed the full implications of their situation. This wasn't merely about language skills. It was about respect, preparation, and the depth of commitment they had demonstrated to understanding their potential partner's world. Throughout this increasingly tense exchange, one person in the room had remained virtually invisible to the high-powered executives. Laila Hassan had been quietly moving around the periphery of the conference room, refilling water glasses, replacing empty coffee carafes, and ensuring that the elaborate lunch spread remained perfectly arranged. Dressed in the building's standard service uniform, a crisp white blouse and navy blue skirt with a discreet name tag, she had performed her duties with the practiced efficiency that made her presence almost unnoticeable to the men and women focused on their multi-million-dollar negotiations. The Atlas executives had barely acknowledged her existence throughout the day, perhaps offering a brief nod when she refilled their coffee cups, but otherwise treating her as part of the room's furniture. In their world of corner offices and executive assistants, service staff were simply background elements that facilitated their important work. Even Sheikh al-Mansouri's team had paid her little attention, though they had offered the polite acknowledgments that their cultural upbringing demanded when she served their mint tea and traditional sweets. But as the afternoon's tension mounted and the cultural divide became increasingly apparent, Laila had found herself listening more intently to the unfolding drama. She understood, perhaps better than anyone else in that room, what was really happening. This wasn't simply about language barriers or cultural sensitivity training. The Sheikh was conducting a fundamental test of character, examining whether these American executives possessed the wisdom and humility to recognize their limitations and the respect to address them meaningfully. As the conversation continued to deteriorate, with each attempt at reconciliation only highlighting the deeper disconnection, Laila felt a familiar tension building in her chest. She had experienced this feeling countless times throughout her life, the frustration of watching problems unfold that she could easily solve, if only anyone bothered to notice that she existed or thought to ask for her perspective. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, a woman who had grown up speaking Arabic as fluently as English, who had spent her childhood summers in Jordan visiting her grandmother, who had studied Middle Eastern cultures and business practices in graduate school. Yet to the powerful people in this room, she was invisible, just another service worker whose thoughts and knowledge were irrelevant to their important affairs. Sheikh al-Mansouri was speaking again, his voice carrying a note of finality that made several Atlas executives shift uncomfortably in their leather chairs. Perhaps, gentlemen and ladies, we should postpone this signing until your organization has time to reflect on whether you are truly prepared for this partnership. Cultural understanding cannot be hired as a consultant or learned in a weekend seminar. It requires genuine commitment and respect. The words hit the Atlas team like a physical blow. Thornfield's face had gone pale as he realized that months of preparation and millions of dollars in potential revenue were slipping away. The Sheikh's advisors were already gathering their documents, the universal signal that a business meeting was concluding unsuccessfully. Dr. Morrison made one final desperate attempt. "Your Excellency, please, give us another chance to demonstrate our commitment. We can arrange for Arabic language training for our entire team. We can hire cultural consultants. We can—" Sheikh al-Mansouri raised his hand gently, stopping her mid-sentence. "Dr. Morrison, I appreciate your sincerity, but these offers reveal that you still don't understand the fundamental issue. This isn't about checking boxes or meeting requirements. It's about genuinely caring enough to prepare for meaningful connection." He stood, and his advisors immediately followed suit. The formal end of negotiations was clearly at hand. Perhaps when your company truly commits to understanding the people you wish to serve, we can revisit this opportunity. Until then, I must consider proposals from organizations that demonstrate greater cultural competence. The silence that followed was crushing. 12 highly accomplished professionals sat frozen, watching their career's biggest opportunity dissolve before their eyes. The months of preparation, the resources invested, the future growth plans built around this contract, all of it crumbling because they had failed a test they hadn't even realized they were taking. It was in that moment of defeat, as the Sheikh prepared to leave and the Atlas executives contemplated the magnitude of their failure, that something unexpected happened. A clear, respectful voice spoke from the edge of the room, not in English, but in perfect, fluent Arabic. "Your Excellency," came the words, spoken with obvious reverence and cultural awareness. "Forgive my presumption in speaking, but I believe there may be more to consider before you reach your final decision." Every head in the room turned toward the source of the voice. The Sheikh's advisors looked shocked. The Atlas executives appeared confused and alarmed. And Sheikh al-Mansouri himself stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable as he processed what had just occurred. The person who had spoken was Laila Hassan, the service worker who had been invisible to everyone in the room until this pivotal moment. She stood with quiet dignity, her posture respectful but confident, addressing the Sheikh in his native language with obvious fluency and cultural sophistication. The silence that followed was absolute and electric. In that suspended moment, everyone in the room understood that something significant had just shifted, though none of them yet grasped the full implications of what was about to unfold. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Sheikh al-Mansuri studied Layla with intense curiosity, his dark eyes taking in details he had previously overlooked. The intelligence in her expression, the confidence in her bearing, the unmistakable competence that had been hiding in plain sight throughout their entire day of negotiations. "You speak our language well," he said in Arabic, his tone carrying both surprise and evaluation. "How is it that you understand these matters when others in this room do not?" What happened next would transform not only the trajectory of the business deal, but also challenge every assumption held by the powerful people who had spent the day treating Layla Hassan as if she were invisible. Her response would reveal hidden depths that would shock the Atlas executives and demonstrate to Sheikh al-Mansuri that sometimes the most valuable wisdom comes from the most unexpected sources. The afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows seemed to spotlight this moment of transformation, as a woman who had been serving coffee and clearing plates prepared to step forward and demonstrate that talent and insight often hide in plain sight, waiting for someone wise enough to notice and humble enough to listen. Layla's response came with the measured confidence of someone who had spent years navigating between worlds that others couldn't even see. Speaking in the flowing cadences of classical Arabic, she addressed Sheikh al-Mansuri with the proper respect his position commanded, yet her words carried an authority that surprised everyone present. "Your Excellency, I have observed today's discussions with great interest, and I believe the challenge you have presented reveals both wisdom and fairness. However, I would respectfully suggest that the Atlas team's lack of Arabic fluency, while unfortunate, may not fully reflect their capacity for cultural understanding or their genuine commitment to honoring your vision." The Sheikh's eyebrows rose slightly, intrigued by both her linguistic sophistication and her bold intervention. His advisors exchanged glances, clearly uncertain about this unexpected development. The Atlas executives sat in stunned silence, struggling to comprehend how their day had taken such a surreal turn. "You speak with considerable eloquence," Sheikh al-Mansuri replied in Arabic, his tone carefully neutral. "But surely you understand that language is the gateway to true cultural comprehension. How can one appreciate the depths of our traditions, our values, our aspirations, without understanding the words that carry our souls?" Layla inclined her head respectfully before responding. "Your Excellency speaks truly about language being a gateway, but perhaps I might offer a different perspective, drawn from my own experience bridging these two worlds. I have watched these individuals work for many months, serving in this building, observing their character when they believed no one of consequence was watching." The admission that she had been observing them sent a ripple of discomfort through the Atlas team. Thornfield's face flushed as he realized that this woman had been witnessing their daily interactions, their casual dismissals of service staff, their assumptions about who mattered and who didn't. Sheikh al-Mansuri leaned forward, genuinely intrigued. "And what have your observations revealed about their character?" Layla paused thoughtfully, choosing her words with care. "I have seen Dr. Morrison stay late into the evening, reviewing environmental impact studies, not because she was required to, but because she genuinely cared about minimizing harm to delicate ecosystems. I have observed Mr. Chen spending his own time researching traditional architectural techniques from the Gulf region, trying to understand how modern engineering might honor ancient wisdom." She gestured subtly toward Thornfield. "I have witnessed Mr. Thornfield quietly arranging for the children of our building's maintenance staff to receive scholarship opportunities, never seeking recognition for these acts of generosity. These are not the behaviors of people who lack respect for others or who approach partnerships with purely selfish motives." The Atlas executives exchanged astonished looks. None of them had realized that their individual efforts and personal character had been witnessed by someone they had never bothered to acknowledge as a full human being. Sheikh al-Mansuri studied Layla with growing fascination. "Your insights are perceptive, but surely you understand that good intentions alone cannot bridge the cultural divide I have identified. How can they truly serve our vision if they cannot comprehend its deeper meanings. With respect, Your Excellency, I would suggest that cultural understanding can be cultivated through partnership with those who possess such knowledge, rather than requiring every individual to achieve mastery independently. The question is not whether they speak Arabic, but whether they possess the wisdom to recognize their limitations and the humility to seek appropriate guidance. The room remained silent as her words sank in. She was essentially arguing that the Atlas team's failure wasn't in their lack of Arabic fluency, but in their failure to identify and utilize cultural resources that were already available to them. Furthermore, Layla continued, I would respectfully observe that Your Excellency's test today has indeed revealed something important about their character. When confronted with their limitations, they did not become defensive or dismissive. They acknowledged their shortcomings and expressed genuine desire to address them, even if their initial suggestions were inadequate. Sheikh al-Mansouri nodded slowly, processing her argument. Your observations have merit, but this raises an obvious question. If such cultural understanding was available within this very building, why did they not seek it out? Why did they not recognize this resource? The question hung in the air like an indictment. Layla's expression grew thoughtful, and when she responded, her words carried a subtle weight that made several Atlas executives shift uncomfortably in their seats. Your Excellency, I believe the answer to that question reveals a different kind of cultural blindness, one that exists within American corporate culture itself. These individuals are accomplished and well-intentioned, but they operate within systems that teach them to see only certain types of people as sources of valuable knowledge. She paused, letting the implication settle before continuing. In their world, expertise is validated by degrees from prestigious universities, titles on business cards, and positions within corporate hierarchies. They would naturally think to consult with professors, hired specialists, or certified consultants. It would not occur to them that the woman refilling their coffee might possess graduate-level knowledge of Middle Eastern business practices. The observation was delivered without bitterness or accusation, but its impact was profound. Every Atlas executive in the room realized they were confronting not just their ignorance of Arabic culture, but their blindness to the knowledge and capabilities that existed all around them, hidden behind assumptions about class, education, and social hierarchies. Dr. Morrison found her voice first, speaking in English, since the conversation had clearly moved beyond her linguistic capabilities. Excuse me, but I think we're all wondering, who exactly are you? Layla turned to address her, switching seamlessly to English. My name is Layla Hassan, Dr. Morrison. I work for Meridian Building Services, primarily maintaining the executive floors of this tower. But your knowledge, your Arabic fluency. Thornfield interjected, his voice trailing off as he struggled to reconcile what he was witnessing with his preconceptions. I was born in Detroit to Jordanian immigrants, Layla explained matter-of-factly. My father was an engineering professor at Wayne State University before the economic downturn eliminated his position. My mother taught Arabic literature at a community college until budget cuts ended her program. I grew up speaking both languages equally, spent summers in Amman with my grandmother, and completed my master's degree in international business with a focus on Middle Eastern markets at Georgetown University. The silence that followed her explanation was deafening. Here was a woman with exactly the expertise they needed, who had been present in their building for months, whom they had never once considered as anything more than part of the invisible service infrastructure that kept their corporate world functioning. Georgetown, Dr. Morrison repeated faintly. That's one of the top programs in the country for Middle Eastern studies. It is, Layla confirmed. I specialized in cross-cultural business negotiations and wrote my thesis on sustainable development partnerships between Western corporations and Gulf state investment funds. The irony was so sharp it was almost painful. They had spent months preparing for this negotiation, hiring expensive consultants and language services, while the person most qualified to help them navigate the cultural complexities had been emptying their wastebaskets and cleaning their conference rooms. Sheikh al-Mansouri had been following this exchange with obvious interest, occasionally translating key points for his advisors in rapid Arabic. Now he addressed Layla directly. Ms. Hassan, your presence here today appears to be quite fortuitous, but I must ask, if you possess such relevant expertise, how do you come to be working in building maintenance? The question was asked with genuine curiosity rather than condescension, but it touched on painful realities that Layla had lived with for years. Your Excellency, The economic recession eliminated many entry-level positions in international business just as I was completing my degree. When my father became ill, I needed immediate employment with health insurance benefits to help support my family. Meridian Building Services offered stable work with good benefits, and the evening shifts allowed me to care for my father during his final months. She paused, her composure steady despite the personal nature of her explanation. After he passed, I discovered that re-entering the professional track in international business was more challenging than I had anticipated. Many employers seemed to view my time in service work as a gap in my career rather than recognizing the valuable skills I had developed. The practical experience of working in a corporate environment, observing executive decision-making processes, understanding organizational dynamics, these seemed to matter less than maintaining an unbroken trajectory within traditional business hierarchies. Her words painted a picture of systemic barriers that prevented capable people from being recognized and utilized effectively. It was a critique of the very systems that had elevated the Atlas executives to their positions of power and influence. Robert Chen, who had remained quiet throughout most of this exchange, finally spoke up. "Miss Hassan, I think I speak for all of us when I say we had no idea of your background or qualifications. If we had known—" "With respect, Mr. Chen," Layla interrupted gently, "that's precisely the point. Your knowledge of my qualifications shouldn't be necessary for you to treat me with basic dignity, or to consider that I might have valuable perspectives to offer. The question isn't why you didn't know about my academic credentials, but why you never thought to ask." The observation hit home with uncomfortable precision. These were individuals who prided themselves on being thorough, on leaving no stone unturned in their professional endeavors. Yet they had spent months in the same building with someone who possessed exactly the expertise they needed, and it had never occurred to any of them to engage her in meaningful conversation. Sheikh al-Mansouri had been listening to this exchange with growing fascination. The cultural test he had intended to conduct had revealed far more than he had anticipated. Instead of simply exposing the Atlas team's lack of Arabic fluency, he had uncovered a complex web of assumptions, barriers, and missed opportunities that said as much about American corporate culture as it did about their preparation for this specific deal. "Miss Hassan," he said, returning to Arabic, "your insights today have been most illuminating, but I find myself curious about your perspective on this project specifically. You have observed these negotiations throughout the day. What are your thoughts on the partnership we have been discussing?" Lila considered the question carefully before responding. "Your Excellency, I believe this project represents an extraordinary opportunity for both parties, but perhaps not for the reasons that have been emphasized in today's discussions." She moved slightly closer to the conference table, her bearing shifting subtly from that of a service worker to that of a business professional. The transformation was remarkable to witness, not because her appearance changed dramatically, but because the Atlas executives were finally seeing her as she truly was. "The technical capabilities that Atlas Engineering brings to this project are genuinely impressive," she continued in Arabic. "Their work on sustainable luxury developments in the Caribbean and Mediterranean demonstrates both engineering excellence and environmental sensitivity. But what makes this partnership potentially transformative is the cultural learning opportunity it represents." Sheikh al-Mansouri leaned forward, intrigued. "Explain this further." "Your Excellency's vision for the Emerald Coast Resort is not simply about creating another luxury destination. From everything I have observed today, you are seeking to demonstrate that development and environmental stewardship can coexist, that modern luxury can honor traditional values, and that international cooperation can produce something greater than either party could achieve alone." She gestured toward the architectural renderings spread across the table. "If Atlas Engineering approaches this project with genuine cultural humility, if they commit to learning not just the technical requirements, but the deeper values that inform your vision, this resort could become a model for how Western engineering capabilities can serve Middle Eastern aspirations without imposing Western assumptions." The Sheikh's advisors had been following this conversation intently, occasionally murmuring among themselves in Arabic. One of them leaned toward the Sheikh and whispered something that caused him to nod thoughtfully. "Miss Hassan," Sheikh al-Mansouri said, "my colleague has just reminded me of something important. Earlier today, I spoke about this project honoring our heritage while embracing innovation. You seem to understand that this requires more than technical competence. It requires genuine partnership between cultures. Do you believe the Atlas team is capable of such partnership? Lila glanced around the room, taking in the faces of the executives who had spent the day treating her as invisible furniture. Her expression was thoughtful rather than judgmental. Your Excellency, I believe they are capable, but only if they are willing to fundamentally change how they approach international partnerships. Today has revealed that they prepared extensively for the technical and financial aspects of this negotiation, but they failed to prepare for the human aspects. The question is whether they can learn from this failure and commit to a different approach going forward. She turned to address the Atlas team directly, switching back to English. The Sheikh's test today wasn't really about Arabic fluency. It was about respect, preparation, and cultural humility. It was about whether you see your international partners as complete human beings with rich cultural traditions that inform their business decisions, or simply as sources of capital who happen to speak different languages. The directness of her assessment created an uncomfortable silence. These were successful people accustomed to praise and deference, not critique from someone they had considered beneath their notice. Thornfield cleared his throat. Miss Hassan, you're absolutely right. We failed today. And not just because we don't speak Arabic. We failed because we didn't do our homework about who we were really trying to partner with. Dr. Morrison nodded, her expression showing genuine contrition. We treated this like a technical negotiation when it was really about building a relationship. We focused on contract terms when we should have been focusing on mutual understanding. Sheikh al-Mansouri had been observing this exchange with keen interest. The cultural test he had intended had evolved into something far more complex, examination of character, humility, and the capacity for growth. Mr. Thornfield, he said, switching back to English, your acknowledgement of these shortcomings is encouraging. But acknowledgement alone is insufficient. If we were to move forward with this partnership, how would you ensure that these mistakes are not repeated? Thornfield looked at his team, then back at the Sheikh. Your Excellency, I think the answer to that question is sitting right here in this room. He turned to Layla. Ms. Hassan, would you consider joining Atlas Engineering as our Director of Cultural Integration for this project? The offer hung in the air, representing a dramatic reversal of fortune for someone who had been invisible to these same executives just hours earlier. But Layla's response was measured rather than enthusiastic. Mr. Thornfield, I appreciate the offer, but I think it reveals that you still don't fully understand the lesson of today. You're essentially proposing to hire me to solve a problem that you've just recognized. But you're framing it as if cultural sensitivity is a specialized skill that can be assigned to one person, rather than a fundamental approach that should inform your entire organization's methodology. Her observation was astute and uncomfortable. Even in their moment of recognition, the Atlas executives were defaulting to their familiar pattern of treating complex challenges as problems that could be solved by hiring the right specialist. What would you suggest instead? Dr. Morrison asked, genuinely seeking guidance. I would suggest that if you're serious about transforming your approach to international partnerships, you need to commit to organizational change, not just individual hires. Every member of your team who would work on this project should invest time in understanding Gulf culture, business practices, and values. You should establish ongoing relationships with cultural consultants, not just for this project, but as a permanent part of your international development process. She paused, then continued with quiet intensity. Most importantly, you need to examine your assumptions about where expertise and insight can be found. Today's failure happened not because the knowledge you needed was unavailable, but because you never thought to look for it in places that didn't fit your preconceptions. Sheikh al-Mansouri had been listening to this exchange with growing admiration. The young woman had not only demonstrated linguistic and cultural competence, but had shown remarkable wisdom in her analysis of organizational dynamics and systemic barriers. Ms. Hassan, he said, your insights today have been extraordinary, but I find myself wondering about your own aspirations. Clearly, your current position does not fully utilize your capabilities. What would represent meaningful work for someone with your knowledge and perspective? The question was asked with genuine interest, and Lila took time to consider her response carefully. Your Excellency, my goal has always been to facilitate understanding between cultures, to help bridge the gaps that prevent potentially beneficial partnerships. Whether that happens through formal consulting, academic research, or direct involvement in international development projects, matters less to me than having the opportunity to contribute meaningfully to work that creates positive change. Her answer revealed both ambition and idealism, tempered by the practical realities she had navigated throughout her career. Sheikh al-Mansouri exchanged a long look with his advisors, conducting a brief conversation in Arabic that the Atlas executives couldn't follow. When he turned back to the group, his expression had shifted from evaluation to decision. "I believe today's events have revealed something important about the potential for this partnership," he announced. Ms. Hassan's presence and insights have demonstrated that the cultural understanding necessary for this project's success is indeed available. The question is whether all parties are prepared to embrace the changes necessary to access and utilize such understanding effectively. He stood, and once again his advisors prepared to follow suit, but this time his bearing suggested continuation rather than conclusion. "I am prepared to move forward with this partnership, but under modified terms. Atlas Engineering must commit to a comprehensive cultural integration process for all team members who will work on this project. Hassan must be retained as Director of Cross-Cultural Development, with authority to influence project decisions that involve cultural considerations. And both organizations must establish ongoing protocols for ensuring that future international partnerships begin with genuine cultural preparation, rather than assuming that good intentions alone are sufficient." The terms represented both opportunity and challenge for the Atlas team. They were being offered a second chance, but only if they were willing to fundamentally change their approach to international business. Thornfield looked around the table at his colleagues, reading agreement in their expressions. "Your Excellency, we accept these terms." "And Ms. Hassan," he turned to her with newfound respect, "we would be honored to have you join our team, not just for this project, but as a permanent part of our organization's evolution." Layla's response came with quiet dignity. "I accept the position, but I want to be clear about my expectations. This role cannot be simply about preventing cultural misunderstandings. It must be about creating genuine partnerships that honor both parties' values and aspirations. It must be about changing how your organization sees and engages with the world." The transformation in the room was remarkable. What had begun as a failed negotiation had evolved into something far more significant. A recognition that true partnership requires not just technical competence but genuine human understanding, and that such understanding often exists in unexpected places, waiting for someone wise enough to recognize and embrace it. Sheikh al-Mansouri smiled for the first time that day, extending his hand to Thornfield. "Mr. Thornfield, I believe we have the foundation for something extraordinary. Not just a successful business venture, but a model for how different cultures can collaborate with mutual respect and shared purpose." As hands were shaken and preliminary agreements reached, the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the conference room windows seemed to illuminate more than just the architectural renderings on the table. It highlighted the faces of people who had learned something important about assumptions, recognition, and the hidden expertise that surrounds us all, waiting for moments of wisdom and humility to bring it into the light. The Sheikh's test had revealed far more than anyone had anticipated, and its lessons would reshape not just this business deal, but the fundamental approach that Atlas Engineering would take to every international partnership that followed. The months that followed the dramatic negotiation would prove transformative for everyone involved. Atlas Engineering underwent what industry observers would later call a cultural revolution, fundamentally altering how the company approached international partnerships. The changes began immediately, with Thornfield authorizing comprehensive Arabic language training for the entire Emerald Coast project team. But the transformation went far deeper than linguistic education. Layla Hassan's transition from building services to the executive suite created ripple effects throughout the organization that no one had anticipated. Her first week as Director of Cross-Cultural Development was spent not in orientation meetings or policy reviews, but in walking the halls of Atlas Engineering with fresh eyes, identifying other overlooked resources within their own workforce. She discovered that Miguel Santos, the night security supervisor, held an engineering degree from Universidad Nacional de Colombia and possessed intimate knowledge of sustainable construction techniques used in South American developments. Elena Petrov, who cleaned the design department offices, had worked as an architect in Kiev before immigrating to the United States, bringing expertise in cold climate construction that could prove invaluable for Atlas's expansion into Northern European markets. Most shocking of all was the revelation that David Kim, the soft-spoken maintenance technician who serviced the building's advanced climate control systems, held a PhD in environmental engineering from Seoul National University, and had published papers on energy-efficient building design that were cited by leading sustainability experts worldwide. "We've been sitting on a gold mine of expertise," Thornfield confided to Dr. Morrison during one of their weekly project reviews. "How many other companies are making the same mistake? How much talent are we collectively wasting because we can't see past job titles and assumptions about who matters?" The question haunted him, driving policy changes that would eventually be adopted across Atlas Engineering's global operations. The company established what they called knowledge discovery protocols, systematic processes for identifying and utilizing expertise wherever it existed within their extended workforce, regardless of formal position or traditional hierarchies. Meanwhile, Sheikh al-Mansouri had been conducting his own revolution within the Abu Dhabi consortium. The lessons learned during the Atlas negotiation had prompted serious discussions about how Gulf investment funds evaluated potential Western partners. The Sheikh's advisors initially questioned whether his approach had been too harsh, potentially driving away qualified partners over what some viewed as cultural perfectionism. "Excellence," the Sheikh had responded during one particularly heated internal debate, "is not perfectionism. Excellence is the wisdom to recognize that technical competence without cultural understanding produces inferior results. We are not seeking partners who can simply execute our vision. We are seeking partners who can enhance our vision through genuine collaboration." His philosophy was vindicated as the Emerald Coast project progressed, with Lila serving as cultural bridge and the Atlas team genuinely committed to understanding Gulf perspectives on luxury, sustainability, and hospitality. The resort's design evolved into something far more sophisticated than either party had originally imagined. The underwater suites, initially conceived as engineering marvels designed to impress wealthy tourists, were reimagined through the lens of traditional Arabic concepts of harmony with nature. Instead of imposing artificial structures on the marine environment, the final design created living spaces that seemed to grow organically from the coral reefs, with viewing windows positioned to frame the underwater landscape like traditional Islamic geometric art. The floating gardens, originally planned as exotic amenities, became expressions of the ancient Persian tradition of paradise gardens, incorporating native Gulf plants and traditional irrigation techniques that had sustained desert communities for centuries. Each garden told stories through its plant selections, creating educational experiences that would help international visitors understand the region's agricultural heritage and environmental wisdom. Dr. Morrison found herself spending weeks in traditional souks and heritage sites, learning how Arabic architectural principles could inform sustainable modern design. Her background in environmental engineering, combined with her newfound appreciation for Gulf cultural values, produced innovations that impressed even seasoned Middle Eastern architects. "I used to think sustainability was about reducing environmental impact," she explained to a gathering of international development professionals 6 months after the project began. "Now I understand that true sustainability requires honoring the cultural wisdom that has allowed communities to thrive in challenging environments for generations. We're not just building a resort, we're creating a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern capability." The transformation wasn't limited to the Atlas team. Sheikh al-Mansouri's approach to the partnership had evolved as well, influenced by Layla's insights about the value of patient cultural education over cultural testing. Instead of expecting immediate understanding from his Western partners, he began investing time in explaining the deeper motivations behind his business decisions, creating opportunities for genuine dialogue rather than one-sided education. "Ms. Hassan taught me something important," he reflected during a private conversation with his senior advisor. "Cultural superiority is as dangerous as cultural ignorance. True partnership requires both parties to remain humble students of each other's wisdom." This philosophy transformed the entire project dynamic. Monthly meetings became cultural exchange sessions where team members from both organizations shared insights, challenges, and discoveries. Atlas engineers learned about Islamic principles of environmental stewardship, while Gulf advisors gained appreciation for Western innovations in sustainable technology. The breakthrough moment came during the resort's water management system design. Traditional engineering approaches would have relied on energy-intensive desalination and treatment facilities, but Lila's research into historical water conservation techniques led the team to discover ancient quantum systems that had sustained Gulf communities for centuries. Working with local historians and traditional craftsmen, the Atlas engineering team developed a hybrid system that combined cutting-edge filtration technology, with time-tested water harvesting and distribution methods. The result was a water management system that was both more sustainable and more resilient than purely modern approaches. "We're not just building a resort," Robert Chen observed during one design review meeting. "We're creating a demonstration of how traditional wisdom and modern innovation can enhance each other. This project is going to change how the entire industry thinks about sustainable luxury development." The success wasn't lost on other major corporations. Within a year of the Atlas Abu Dhabi partnership announcement, Lila was receiving calls from Fortune 500 companies seeking consultation on their own international ventures. The business press began featuring articles about the Atlas model of cross-cultural partnership, and business schools started developing case studies around the negotiation that had nearly failed. But perhaps the most significant change was personal. Lila's transformation from invisible service worker to recognized expert had inspired similar revelations throughout the corporate world. Companies began examining their own assumptions about where talent and expertise could be found, leading to unprecedented opportunities for individuals whose capabilities had been overlooked due to circumstances, background, or systemic barriers. Miguel Santos was recruited by a leading South American development firm to head their sustainability initiatives. Elena Petrov found herself consulting on Arctic construction projects, her expertise in extreme climate architecture suddenly in high demand, as climate change created new engineering challenges. David Kim accepted a position with a green technology startup, his combination of practical maintenance experience and theoretical knowledge proving invaluable for developing real-world solutions. The ripple effects extended beyond corporate boardrooms. Universities began reaching out to working professionals, recognizing that valuable research insights were being developed by people who combined practical experience with theoretical knowledge in ways that traditional academic paths couldn't replicate. "We created a system that wasted human potential on an unprecedented scale," observed Dr. Sarah Martinez, a business school professor who had studied the Atlas case extensively. "The remarkable thing isn't that Layla Hassan had extraordinary capabilities while working in building services. The remarkable thing is how many other Layla Hassans are out there, waiting for someone to recognize their value." Sheikh al-Mansouri would later reflect that his test of the Atlas team had revealed far more about his own assumptions than he had initially realized. The negotiation had been designed to expose Western cultural blindness, but it had also highlighted the dangers of any approach that treated cultural understanding as a zero-sum competition rather than an opportunity for mutual enrichment. "True leadership," he observed during a speech at the Gulf Business Council annual conference, "requires the wisdom to create conditions where hidden excellence can reveal itself. Sometimes that means testing people's assumptions, but more often it means examining our own assumptions about where wisdom and capability can be found." The Emerald Coast Resort, when it finally opened 18 months later, was recognized as a masterpiece of sustainable luxury design. International architecture critics praised its seamless integration of traditional and modern elements, while environmental groups celebrated its innovative approach to ecosystem preservation and water conservation. But for those who had been present during that pivotal negotiation in the Meridian Tower conference room, the building's greatest achievement was what it represented: proof that the most extraordinary partnerships emerge when people have the wisdom to look beyond surface appearances and the humility to recognize that excellence often hides in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to truly see it. The resort's success spawned a new approach to international development partnerships, one that prioritized cultural integration and genuine collaboration over purely transactional relationships. The Atlas model became standard curriculum in business schools worldwide, teaching future executives that the most valuable expertise often comes from the most unexpected sources, and that true partnership requires the courage to challenge assumptions about who matters and whose knowledge counts. As Lila Hassan settled into her corner office, the same building where she had once emptied wastebaskets and refilled coffee carafes, she kept a small reminder of her journey prominently displayed on her desk, her old building services name tag, mounted in an elegant frame beside her new business cards. It served as a daily reminder that transformation is always possible, but only for those wise enough to recognize potential wherever it exists, and humble enough to embrace the lessons that come from truly seeing the people around them. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.